Originally, I wanted to make a video about climate change alarmism, but I think it would negate the true purpose of this video, and so I decided to go more towards the current hoax or current conspiracy theory belief that climate change isn't real, even though in elementary school we learned that's real, but whatever. And I find this specific hoax to be very foolish and very depressing. I do think that there is a level of climate change alarmism which is troublesome and problematic, but that's another video I will make in the future, hopefully. Science of this kind is actually kind of complicated, but as a scientific community, we all agree that climate change is real. The reason it's somewhat complicated is because air science is very complicated. Air is not a very easily distinguishable system. The layers of the atmosphere are very confusing and complicated, and the way they're impacted via the carbon cycle, hydrogen cycle, nitrogen cycle, all of that is very complex. But it's easy to bring it down into a lower level for people to understand, which is why even in elementary school we learn about climate change. And we are actually now able to analyze CO2 levels, both in ice cores and in the atmosphere, and we can then use our basic chemistry knowledge of how CO2 functions in the atmosphere, and methane and all that, and other greenhouse gases, which, for example, technically water vapor is a greenhouse gas, but I digress. And we can look at this, look at human emissions, which we know our emissions, and we know natural carbon emissions, which is called anthropogenic, because we as a scientific community need to be confusing and make it so people can understand. And we compare these and look at the effects based on our chemistry knowledge. And so, in this video, hopefully I can get across how dangerous climate change is and can be if we do not address it, and how many scientists agree that climate change is real. So how many scientists agree that climate change is real? 97% of scientists agree that climate change is occurring and that humans are causing it. Period. We know that there is, I put a lot in my script, there isn't actually a lot of anti-climate change papers. There is some, and most of them, if you look at the scientists who are making them, they're being paid by fossil fuel companies. They have the same lawyers, the same writers, the same scientists who were originally behind the cigarette situation, which is actually really interesting. I'll provide a link to that in the comments. So pretty much cigarette companies hired a bunch of scientists to trick the public into thinking that cigarettes weren't all that bad, even though we already knew that they were bad. So we kind of propagated that lie for a little longer than it should have been because of scientists and the such. The system of scientists established by tobacco companies eventually swayed the public opinion and then was used once again here. If we were to continue using fossil fuels at our current rate, so let's pretend climate change isn't real for like 10 seconds here, we would actually, based on current use of fossil fuels, oil and coal, we would be out around 2050 to 2060. 2050, 2060, and what from now, let's see, 28 years, we'll be out based on current use if we do not decrease current use. Okay? This is a complete fact proven even by fossil fuel companies who are now further funding climate change. Okay? So if you don't believe in scientists due to them being bought by liberals or something, George Soros or whatever, I want to ask you specifically, why do you think you're smarter than those who study climate change constantly? Why do you think you know so much when even the fossil fuel companies are now switching to renewable energy and the such? Why are you smarter? Why are you smarter than all of these engineers? I just want to know. Why? How? And why are you just so knowledgeable compared to these scientists? That's all I'm asking. That's all I'm asking, conspiracy theorists. Okay, so as you can tell, we're back to climate change is real, okay? So, first of all, we will be running out of fossil fuels very quickly, so but ignore climate change. We're going to be out, so we need a way to get away from this. Think by 2050, you might not be able to drive a car. So looking at this graph here, we can see current levels of CO2 in the atmosphere. CO2 is actually a vital part of our atmosphere and helps deal with incoming heat from the sun and has some other uses. However, when we exceed the natural levels and go to a certain point, it creates a blanket that traps in heat. So the heat is able to enter the atmosphere, and then it's not able to refract and leave due to this blanket of CO2. And looking at instrument data since 1950, we see that overall, there has in fact been a measurable increase in temperature over time around the world. And remember, this is climate, not weather. Weather is short term over the course of a year. Climate is over years, decades, centuries. Okay, so weather versus climate. Natural changes in weather patterns will usually dictate the temperature for summers and winters in different regions. This is why we have a situation where max temperatures in areas were reached decades or centuries ago. That's just due to natural fluctuations in the overall weather patterns. And as we see climate change impact it more, we could see an increase in these temperatures in these regions, theoretically. But simply saying we had higher temperatures back then is not a way to disprove this. Weather science, climate science completely understands why this happens, okay? This doesn't disprove climate change. And like I said, basic chemistry tells us that CO2 creates a greenhouse effect which traps in heat, which is bad. And by basic chemistry, I mean elementary schoolers, like I said in the intro. Elementary schoolers know more than you conspiracy theorists. Come on. So human-made CO2 emissions, also called anthropogenic carbon emissions, are against the carbon system. And by that I mean we are taking carbon that is in a carbon sink, which is pretty much just over time it goes either underground or under the ocean, and it just sits there over time. It takes centuries to form a fossil fuel. We then, centuries, it's even greater than that, whatever. We then take it out, skip parts of the carbon cycle, and just use it. And so we are negating a natural system that was established by nature over its entire existence. And we are taking out these carbon sinks, and we're setting that carbon in the atmosphere. The graph here of carbon flux shows that due specifically to the stealing away from the carbon sinks by burning fossil fuels, we're increasing atmospheric CO2 levels. So I want to save a majority of my discussion regarding the impacts of climate change for another video, but I do think we blow climate change out of proportion to an extent. And I think we need a pragmatic but optimistic approach to solving it. We really need to educate these people who believe climate change is fake. They are seeing these alarmism approaches, which are based on some science, but usually the people who do it do not understand it, and they misinterpret papers, they misinterpret information, and we use scare science to scare people into caring. That's what I said, marrying. Oops. Yeah. We scare people into caring about these issues, and then all of a sudden we're stuck in this dilemma where now they don't want to do anything because now all of a sudden life doesn't matter. And we have that sort of mindset with a lot of people. I digress. But we know basic science, basic ideas of how carbon works, and we know that the carbon in the atmosphere is bad. We know it causes climate change over time, and we don't fully know the impacts of climate change. We're just guessing over time. And the impacts can be drastic if we reach a certain point. And speaking of reaching a certain point, we know, looking back in time, that when the Earth hits a certain temperature threshold, it begins to cause a cascade effect, usually, that results in an ice age. Ice age are natural, and we are delayed for an ice age. And very likely that if we continue down this path, we could cause our own ice age by our increase in CO2 levels. And who knows what that would cause around the world. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I just recorded this immediately after my previous video, which probably, knowing me, will be weeks between each other. And doing YouTube, I doubt either video will get as many views as my actually Biden diary video, which popped off. I'm very happy about that, and very funny that's the video that popped off. Honestly, not very proud of that video, but it got a lot of views, so works out for me. I honestly kind of just want to make a response to that video, but I'm giving it a lot of time until I do that, and it's not going to be that good of a video, but I think it'd be interesting to look at because the comments were hilarious. And with the midterms coming up, I might make a video about the midterms. Honestly, it's just kind of sad right now. I want to see some research papers on current politics because I think it's really interesting, and honestly I can make a video on that, but no one will care. So I digress. Thank you for watching. hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hopefully you've enjoyed all of my videos. I don't know. Some of them are lower quality than others. I think this one might be a little lower quality, but whatever. Thank you for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.